Coming up on Capital Crossfire, 3 panelists join us to discuss Trump's return to the White House. Our experts break down everything from executive orders, Trump's mandate, and cabinet nominations. Plus, we hear from students on campus about their latest political takes.
Joining us today for our discussion, Liz Stoddard, a sophomore political science major and SGA senator, Logan Sedran, a junior political science and economics major, and Grant Aung, a junior political science major.
I'm Cassidy.
And I'm Devin.
From the GWTV studios here in Washington, D.C.
This is Capital Crossfire.
Trump's presidency began amidst stark partisan divides. How can college Republicans and college Democrats promote bipartisan cooperation and constructive debate on campus?
Yeah, I think a lot of the divide that came about was really what Democrats saw as sort of an illegitimate presidency on his first part, winning the Electoral College and then not winning the popular vote. So there's a lot of people, who kind of question it. I think tension came there because we just have such stark ideological differences. And I think with this recent election, Trump won not only the Electoral College vote, but also the popular vote. And I think it kind of gave a lot of Americans and maybe politicians okay, MAGA is not this extreme right-wing ideology. It's something that a majority of Americans and even independents can get behind. So I think this recent election gave our movement a lot of legitimacy and maybe even respect from the other side, just based on how much we won. So I just kind of hope that in the future, we can continue to work and talk. And recently, since the election, I've had a lot of good conversations with Democrats. I've had a lot of good conversations with Democrats, and it's been constructive. So I think it kind of seems like we're moving down a road towards more cooperation.
Liz, is there anything you'd like to say to that?
No, I think that the way that college Democrats and college Republicans interact is they do debates and they have those conversations. And although they're definitely, I'd say, a very fun affair, and a lot of people share a lot of their opinion, and it gets quite loud with the applause and everything, it's still, I think, an olive branch to have a good discussion, at least at our institution. I would say that at the same time, I think we can all understand that a large swath of America is completely and utterly dissatisfied with the way this country is moving. But I would also not quantify those individuals who swung from Joe Biden to Donald Trump as being part of the MAGA ideology, but more as individuals dissatisfied with the way that the country was moving under Joe Biden's administration.
I think the dream I think we always feel nostalgic about a forgotten past when there was bipartisan cooperation. But I mean, if you look at the Western advanced democracies in the world, all of them have much greater party line discipline than America even today, and certainly America in the past. And so I think we're just converging towards a trend that the rest of the world's already at, and I don't see a return to that. So I just anticipate further party discipline and party line votes on everything. In most, in Britain, in most countries in the world, it's considered treasonous for a prime minister to rely on opposition votes to pass anything. So.
Let's move on to our next question. With Trump's sweep of the 7 battleground states and popular vote win, do you think Trump has a bigger mandate than he did before to enact his agenda? Liz, let's start with you.
I think certainly the argument can be made that a large amount of Americans saw a large appeal with Donald Trump, and that's why they pulled the lever for him. But I would also say that there is a mix of undesirable economic outcomes that forced people to really analyze, not only their party affiliations, but who they were going to vote for, as more and more people are identifying as independent rather than Republican or Democrat. And I think what that said is, hey, Donald Trump, get the prices down, and then we'll talk. But I think a lot of Americans didn't quite understand the breadth of his agenda and what that looked like. And I think a lot of people were turning to him during a point of economic struggle and signed up for that point, but I don't think really signed up for the rest of Agenda 47.
Grant, would you like to add?
I think in some ways, because he did win the popular vote, but also his majority in the House is tiny, way tinier than in his first term. It'll be a majority of one Stefanik and what is his name? Mike Waltz get confirmed. So basically every single House Republican, including many in California who are who face very, very tough re-elections, the ones in California, New York, and blue states. Every single one of those members has a veto on anything he tries to pass. So it's going to be very, very difficult.
I'd like to respond to your point first. Yes, we have a 2-seat majority, 1 or 2 seat majority, but Republicans won the national House popular vote by the largest margin for Republicans in the House ever. I think when you couple that combined with Trump winning the EC and the popular vote, he has the most legitimacy, and he's really at the climax of his political power walking into the Oval Office right now. And that's on full display right now. He went to Capital One Arena and signed his executive orders and proclamations. I think there were 6 of them right there in front of the people, and then through the pins that he used to sign them into the crowd. I think it was a very symbolic, and it kind of encapsulates like his whole campaign was he wants to do this for the people. And I think just like that one simple demonstration really kind of like encapsulated that.
I think that to say Donald Trump is a man of the people is fiction. I think that Donald Trump at his core is someone who is deeply selfish. I think Donald Trump rode the wave that people gave him. They put their trust in him to the idea of someone who was strong and powerful, who would stand up for America and make sure that our economy would go forward. I don't think they really signed up for his character. I used to work at a Republican communications firm, and we did a lot of testimonials with former Republican and conservative voters who once voted for Donald Trump and switched sides. And what we saw both with them and MAGA voters was that they're not picking Donald Trump for the character. They're not picking Donald Trump because they like who he is. They're picking Donald Trump because it is better than the alternative. And for individuals part of that MAGA movement, they go a little further. But I think everyone can acknowledge that Donald Trump isn't really a man of the people. I don't think Donald Trump, honestly, really cares a lot about his people, because after time and time again, it is seen that he doesn't actually really like his supporters that much. I mean, you come to Washington, D.C. to watch your guy who just came in on the largest mandate get inaugurated, and yet every single opportunity there is to have these big events, often they didn't happen, leaving MAGA supporters feeling unheard and unseen by the guy who got their votes. So I think if Donald Trump is really a man of the people, really that guy, really the character that you believe he is, I just want to ask you deep down, do you really believe that that kind of person, that kind of man, should be in charge of the nuclear codes, especially if we're thinking strictly on character basis? Because as everyone knows, he is a felon. He did cheat on his pregnant wife. He did lie about it. And additionally said more and more disparaging things about people, including his supporters. So I just don't really buy the character argument. I buy that, yes, he did get the largest mandate, but I'm sorry, you're not really treating your people who got you there with the most respect you should be.
What are your thoughts on the presence of CEOs in Trump's inner circle and growing concerns of the existence of an oligarchy influencing the executive branch?
I think that's just Biden being a sore loser. And I say this as someone who voted for Kamala, who was upset when Trump won. But I mean, Forbes did a report shortly before the election that showed that the vast majority of billionaires in America supported Kamala. And then if you look at the amount of donations that Kamala had, she had more than double the amount of donations that Trump did. If you look at high income earners, those who made over $80,000 and those who made over $120,000 especially, those were the people who, that was a super strong predictor voting for Kamala. She won big majorities of those groups. A complete inversion from what we've known for most of our lives in terms of the party ideology and supporter base. So it's clear that these tech CEOs don't really love Trump or anything. They're just warming up to him because they don't want to be on his bad side and face retribution. And as principals as agents for the principle that are their shareholders who they serve, that they have a responsibility to shareholders to do that.
Let's take a quick break and turn to our reporters on what students are feeling about the new administration.
So how do you feel about Pete Hegseth's confirmation as Secretary of Defense?
Well, I feel he's very unqualified. I mean, if you just look at the Senate vote here, it's the second time in American history that like a cabinet nominee has had to be confirmed by a tie-breaking vote for the vice president. So the fact that Republicans defected on him, even someone as conservative as Mitch McConnell, just shows that voting no on Hegseth just shows how unique and unqualified he is.
He's not qualified. I mean, there's nothing else to say. He should have never even been nominated. I mean, this is the first time in how long we've had a defense secretary and a 50-50 Senate, only second, I believe, tie-breaking vote ever for a cabinet member. That's pretty pathetic.
And with Russell Vought in the Office of Budget and Management, how do you feel about Project 2025's possible influence on a second Trump term?
I feel like Republicans, they made it clear that one of their biggest priorities this year, aside from like immigration, is budget cuts, and they're going to try and do something through a reconciliation bill. So I feel like definitely with majorities in both the House and Senate, Republicans are definitely going to try to do some big reconciliation bill, budget cuts to all types of programs. Whether it gets to the House, I think is a bit tricky because they have such a small majority that like literally like one or two Republicans defecting could mean the end of the bill. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, we're seeing it already. His advisors wrote Project 2025. How many of his executive orders are already showing the concepts of Project 2025? We're already seeing that.
And at the time of recording, with RFK's hearings set for Thursday, how do you feel about the prospect of him as in Health and Human Services?
I feel like he's not simply like, oh, he's conservative and he has issues that I may disagree with. I feel like he's very unpredictable. Like, he tends to have very, He tends to have very warped views on stuff. Like, some people call it thinking outside the box. Me personally, I think it's kind of dangerous because, you know, you don't know what this guy's really thinking, what he's really going to implement. And he's made all these promises of what he's going to do, and you wonder, like, would he even be able to get those done? Like, how serious is he on these? So I personally think there's much more qualified people for the job, and I think it's more of a loyalty thing. Like, Trump no doubt made RFK a deal that, hey, if you drop out and don't run this third-party campaign, I'll put you in like cabinet positions.
He's a danger to public health. I agree with Caroline Kennedy. We've got to reject his confirmation, and Vice President Mike Pence. I agree with him too.
And with rumors of tension already brewing between Trump and Elon Musk, how do you feel about the possibility or the general just happening of a Department of Government efficiency?
In terms of Trump and Elon Musk's relationship, I don't know. I mean, I feel like with most relationships in Washington, it's kind of tense because I think with Trump, what we know of his history with him, for Trump, he has to be number one. No one can outstage him. So I feel like if Elon Musk starts outstaging Trump or starts getting more popular, like say in media and say on social media than Donald Trump is, then there'll be a rift between him and Trump. But like, I feel like so long as Elon Musk doesn't get too popular, the relationship between him and Trump may maintain as it is.
I mean, the department doesn't have a whole lot of power anyway, but I mean, he'll just find another puppet, so I'm not worried.
I think that's all we got, so thank you very much.
All right, good to meet you.
To our next question. Trump signed sweeping executive orders after his swearing in on Monday. One that has come under fire from organizations like the ACLU is an executive order that excludes immigrants of certain status from birthright citizenship. What do you think Trump hopes to achieve with this action, and will it hold up in federal court? Liz, would you like to start?
I don't think it will hold up in federal court. Actually, today, a judge in Seattle said, no, my friend, we're not doing that. And I think that's correct. I think any challenge to the Constitution that is so blatant, I mean, let's just take a second and read the 14th Amendment, which is all persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States wherein they reside. There's not much wiggle room in there, and I think if that was put before the Supreme Court, I think Justice Roberts, I think Amy Coney Barrett, I think Neil Gorsuch would have a tough time with stretching that. And I think the claim that's being made and will be made by Trump's lawyers is that this piece of the Constitution is only about slavery when it was first enacted, but I think now we can all interpret it and understand it as being about birthright citizenship. If you were born in this country, no matter the legal status of your parents, you are a citizen of this country. I think there are hundreds and thousands of people, actually 1.3 million US-born people whose parents are undocumented, who contribute effectively to our economy and help push this country forward. And I think to say any babies born after February are no longer going to be citizens, I mean, there's no real enforcement to that. It's executive order. And additionally, I don't think anything's going to change because of that, and it's also going to be struck down in federal court, go up to the Supreme Court, and hopefully be struck down at the Supreme Court. But you never know; they really play fast and loose with the Constitution over there. So I think there's nothing to achieve here. The only thing to achieve here is to sort of placate his base, make himself feel good, and that's about it. But there's actually no real change, and it would be more politically expedient for him to focus on other things that aren't going to be dead on arrival.
I don't know if the executive order will pass legal scrutiny. It all depends on the phrase "under the jurisdiction thereof." The Trump administration is going to argue that excludes certain people, like illegal immigrants who they would say aren't under the jurisdiction of the U.S. But substantively, I agree very strongly with the policy that the executive order produced. It's completely wrong. It creates the law creates a massive incentive for illegal immigrants to come in a mad dash over the border while they're pregnant, and so that once their child is born in America, it's an American citizen, and that if they're called anchor babies because that anchors the entire family into the U.S. because it's considered inhumane, rightly, to separate that American citizen child from their illegal immigrant, non-American parents. And I will say, I grew up in Chinatown, in Oakland, Chinatown. And my mom knew of tons of organizations that if you pay them $6,000, they're going to take an upper middle class Chinese family, they're going to sneak a pregnant upper middle class woman from that family into America, and that child would get American citizenship. And a lot of people pay $6,000 for that service, and I think most Americans see that as a gross violation of our rule of law and a deeply unfair and unjust phenomenon. And during the Biden administration, there were 10 million border encounters at the southern border of the U.S. from illegal immigrants trying to get in. I think that that's something that cries out for a solution. Illegal immigration is a moral abomination. These are people who, in their first act in this country, willfully defy the democratically elected laws of this society. They're not people that we should welcome into our national community.
Can I just respond to that real quick?
Sure.
I think that this picture you're painting of a bunch of pregnant women making a mad dash across the border by the millions is not quite accurate. I think that if you want to, keep American values close to your chest, you have to understand that America thrives off diversity. And I think the reason they chose to have this in the Constitution not only was for slaves who were not considered citizens at the time, but I also think it's important to understand that you were born on American soil, you are an American citizen, and that was guaranteed to you by the U.S. Constitution. We're not Monaco, where you need to be there for 8 whole generations in order to be considered a citizen. The whole point is that America is an equal opportunity environment, where if you're born here, you have every opportunity to have all the benefits of being an American citizen. And yes, I do agree illegal immigration is a large problem, but I also would like to put this into perspective that technically, parents who are here illegally can still be deported even if their children are U.S. citizens. And it has happened before, and it does happen, and I guarantee you Donald Trump will continue that policy. But to say that there is this malicious running of the pregnant ladies across the border, I think is gravely inaccurate, and I also think it sort of demonizes people who are fleeing conflict, especially those who have lost everything or a fear of gang violence. I don't know about you, but I'll be so for real if my family is being threatened to be murdered or perhaps, bludgeoned or beaten by the Sinaloa cartel. I'm going to be honest, I'm making a mad dash for that border, and I don't really care what the rules have to say. Even though it's wrong, even though we can have an argument that it's wrong and you shouldn't do it, there is something like, empathy that you can have for people who, even though they know it's wrong, they want to make sure that their kids, that they are safe. And I think they get those repercussions when it comes, ICE knocking on their door, whether we think that is right or wrong. There are repercussions for those actions, and I think Donald Trump will make sure there are repercussions for those actions. But I think the way it is set up, that if you are born in this country, you are a citizen, should remain that way. And I think that's one of the core tenets that make this country fantastic and great, is that we have a lot of different people from a lot of different places that contribute exponentially. And I think that will continue to make our nation greater, and I don't think we should be changing these laws or amending our Constitution to change parts that have been there since the 1800s, especially when it comes to, whether or not you think it's right, stopping illegal immigration. We can do that without altering a fundamental piece of our American values in our Constitution.
I would say.
I want to jump in. Logan, do you want to add anything to this conversation?
Yeah, so I completely agree with your point about anchor babies. I don't think that the Constitution really, or when they were writing the 14th Amendment, obviously, this wasn't an issue, and we're trying to use their language to apply it now. But I don't think that was in the design. I don't think that was meant to happen. When it comes to you, when you were talking about family safeties, fleeing from cartel violence, which is very real, fleeing dictatorships, very real. But we do have an asylum system in the country. And if you want to come here and seek asylum because your home country is dangerous, there is a legal way to do that. You come through a port of entry. A lot of these people they are fleeing violence, but they come through the southern border. They come through illegally when we have an established process for that. When it comes to the original question at hand, I think that Trump signed this executive order knowing that he was sending it to his conservative Supreme Court. That's definitely logically tracks, because everyone knows, this wouldn't hold up if you textually read the Constitution. And I think it's just going to be interesting when we hear, because we're going to hear the Supreme Court arguments against this, and I think you're going to kind of see a switch of ideologies almost a little bit, where you're going to have conservatives arguing for a looser interpretation of the Constitution when it comes to this matter to advance conservative policy and agenda, and you're going to have the more liberal justices reading it in a more textualist sort of manner to try to stop his executive order. So I think it's very interesting. I think it kind of highlights the political realignment that is underway in the nation right now.
I disagree strongly. First of all, is that diversity is a strength in America. I think it's a weakness that we have to overcome. Robert Putnam, the guy who wrote Bowling Alone, famous Harvard professor, he had a study where he found that diversity was strongly positively associated with, or it was associated with much lower levels of social trust. And a democratic society can't be sustained if citizens mistrust each other, because they have to live together in the same political system and organize and all that. If you actually look at the Trump phenomenon and other national populist movements in the Western world, I think it's primarily produced by too high levels of immigration, too much diversity too quickly, destabilizing the ethno-cultural security of the native majority, traditional majority groups, and the backlash. They ride that backlash into victory, and I think that's why we have to reduce immigration. But Liz is also wrong that Monaco is the only place in the world where there's no birthright citizenship like America has. There's almost not a single European country that does.
Or they have restrictions.
Until 2 years ago, Germany, you could be a Turkish citizen in Germany, born in Turkey for 3-4 generations, and not have German citizenship. You can have a German great-grandmother, never speak German, never step foot in Germany, and have a German passport.
All right. I get that this is a very hearty discussion, but we do have to move on. Our final question for you all today is, Trump has also withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accords on Monday. What impact do you think the Trump administration will have on climate and environmental policy?
I'll go first. So this is one thing where I do break with Republicans. I do think that we need to do something about the environment. All of us are going to have to live here, God willing, 60 more years. So we definitely need to do something about it. But I do support him pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, because if you read the agreement, there are very strict standards for the United States, whereas you have China and India who are allowed to essentially pollute without limitation and allow their industry to grow while we have to cripple ours. I want something done about the environment, but I also think that we need to put humans first. And I think we can balance that, but I don't agree with destroying our way of life in support of environmental policy. We've seen a lot about the electrical vehicle mandate. I don't even think it was necessarily a mandate. A lot of Republicans don't like the idea of electric vehicles. I'm not sure why. If I would buy a car and I had the money, like I would buy an electric vehicle. I think they are sustainable for the environment, better than the combustion engine. And I do think that we should look towards other, we say drill baby drill, but I think we should explore other ways of getting energy besides oil. One thing that's, commonly looked down upon is nuclear energy, which I think is ridiculous. There's just like the big controversy with when they melt down, but if you properly maintain it, which our country can, it can have massive benefits and it could overall help our environment.
I have to agree with you. I think nuclear energy is a great option. I think a lot of people are nervous because they look at Fukushima and they look at 3 Mile Island, they look at Chernobyl and they say, well, nuclear is dangerous. But if you stack that up with the amount of deaths you have at, coal plants or oil fracking or anything like that, it's much higher.
Not to mention the environmental from
Exactly,
mining.
it's much higher. But everyone hears about the disasters and all of a sudden has a view of nuclear energy when I think it could actually be a great frontier for our energy. It also could help us phase into a more hybrid society until we can eventually sort of step away from that, because a hybrid society works a little bit better as we phase slowly, because that allows individuals to then get technical skills to move from industries like fracking, like mining, into the renewable sector.
Completely agree.
And so doing that slowly while also keeping in mind that our planet is boiling right now, I think is increasingly important. I think that Donald Trump's executive order, trying to cease windmill operations and the permits of those because they affect his golf course, I think is a little short-sighted and unnecessary, even though, windmills do contribute to our energy in a positive way. I think that, maybe they're an eyesore. I agree. I don't like the look of them, but I also don't like the look of California on fire. That's a real bummer. So
Can I respond to your point?
I think that's a good opportunity. We can diversify, and we can also make sure that we're keeping people employed from those industries as we move forward.
And this is one thing. Trump has good ideas. He has a hard time laying it out with the details, and that's true for, multiple different things. When it comes to the windmills, he talks about, the beautification and the whales. Those are not topics that, that you should be refuting wind energy with. Our windmills are produced in China, and I read an article that says that it takes more energy, coal, fossil fuels, to produce the windmill than the windmill will actually produce in its lifetime. That's where the problem comes with wind energy. I don't think it's necessarily, whatever.
The whales.
Yeah, I don't think it's the whales. And then when it comes to the wildfires in California, obviously that's tragic, but I don't blame it on climate change. I blame it on government mismanagement 100%.
I think it can be both.
Sorry.
I think the fact that the land is currently in a historic stage of drought,
Yeah.
I think that's contributed by climate change. I also think government mismanagement has an element to it, but those fires, especially large bushfires, especially in Australia, do happen because the land is in a period of long-term drought, and that is mostly because it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter every year. So I think you can blame the current climate as to the drought in California that accelerated those fires, and we can also talk about the handling and how that was done poorly. But I also think climate change does have an element in these ravaging wildfires and long-term flooding in low-lying areas, especially places like Louisiana and Delaware.
Grant, do you want to jump in here?
I agree with all that's been said. I don't like the climate denialism from Republicans. I support nuclear energy. I think a carbon tax would be a great market-based mechanism, but climate denialism is bad, but we also should be cognizant of real people who might lose their jobs or livelihoods.
I actually think that's a great place for us to end, because that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in today's episode. There were a few factual errors we wanted to address from our panelists. First, we wanted to correct the claim that all of our windmills are made in China. According to the Department of Energy, that claim is false. The second claim was that it takes more fossil fuels to make windmills than that the windmill production saves. According to the American Clean Power Association, that claim is false and the recoup production is 6 months.
Well, that's all for this episode of Capital Crossfire.
Be sure to check us out online at www.gw-tv.com And follow us on Instagram and TikTok at GW Capital Crossfire.
For all of us at GWTV, I'm Cassidy.
And I'm Devin.
Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us.
We'll see you back here next time.